The Trump administration has now sent Harvard University a letter threatening every single international student who attends Harvard. There are thousands of them. The university responded by acknowledging receipt of the letter and saying that it, quote, follows on the heels of our statement that Harvard will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. We continue to stand by that statement. We will continue to comply with the law, and we expect the administration to do the same. Joining us now is Professor Stephen Levitsky of Harvard. He is the co-author of Tyranny of the Minority, Why American Democracy Reached the Breaking Point. He's also co-author of the sadly topical blockbuster bestseller, How Democracies Die. Professor Levitsky, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you making time.
Thanks for having me.
So on the eve of the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolution, I feel like Americans are feeling like we're in our own revolutionary or counter-revolutionary moment right now. One of the things that was implicit in your book, How Democracies Die, was the sort of counter-narrative of how democracies can survive, how they can fight and stay alive against an authoritarian attempted takeover. Right now, in the midst of this, where we are, what you're going through at Harvard and what we're going through as a country, how do you think we're doing in terms of the fight?
I'm hopeful that we're getting there, Rachel. We've been a little slow to respond. I think in part that's because most Americans don't have any memory or experience of living under authoritarian rule. We don't have the same collective memory of authoritarianism that Brazilians and Argentines and Chileans and South Koreans and Germans have. And so we just don't know how to react. And also, 21st century authoritarianism looks a lot different than old-fashioned authoritarianism. There aren't tanks in the streets. They're not going to be tanks in the streets. These are often elected governments who weaponize the government and use government agencies as weapons to punish rivals. But it's done often in a fairly legalistic manner. And so citizens are often slow to realize what's going on, to realize that they are, in fact, living in an authoritarian situation. So I think civil society was pretty slow these first few months. There's kind of an expectation that Trump 2.0 would be like Trump 1.0, which from my perspective was pretty bad, but there was a general sense that we muddled through and we'll muddle through again. But this is obviously much worse. But in recent weeks, and what happened at Harvard, I think, is a sign of that, we're beginning to wake up.
Well, let me ask you about the Harvard decision. I feel like Americans all across the country, whether they've got any connection to Harvard or even any connection to higher education at all, I think people have been buoyed by Harvard's decision. It's been described in the national press as potentially the start of a sort of tipping point in terms of the way that people are positing themselves as either acceding to what Trump is doing or willing to fight it. Can you give us any insight into how the decision was made at Harvard? I know you very publicly were part of trying to encourage the institution to take the kind of stance that they did. Can you help us understand how the decision was made and what was compelling to the powers that be there to convince them to take the stand?
Well, I wasn't in the room, so I can only speculate. I think, for one, Harvard's leadership looked at what happened to Columbia. Columbia effectively rolled over and got nothing out of it. All it got was more demands and didn't even get the money released. So that's what happens when you negotiate, make concessions to an authoritarian extortionist. And so Harvard realized that strategy was a dead end. I think also the public debate had begun to shift. As you know very well, the first few months, it's not just an attack on universities, it's an attack on law firms, it's an attack on the media, it's an attack on politicians, on public critics of Trump, foundations, NGOs. And the initial response across the board was, unfortunately, among the most powerful law firms, most powerful billionaires in this country, was to get on their knees. And but the public conversation has begun to shift. People have become very critical of that, and there's been a growing sense, I think, across the country that we need to do better, that we need to respond, we need to get off the sidelines, and that it has to be our most privileged and most powerful civic leaders who do it first. We can't just rely on little old ladies in front of Tesla dealerships. God love them, but those with the power and the resources to withstand the blows have got to take leadership. And that public debate, I think, eventually prevailed at Harvard. In addition, the list of demands was so excessive, so authoritarian, that if Harvard were to accept it, it would have been the end of Harvard as a free university, as an institution, a democratic institution of higher education. We cannot let the federal government dictate what we teach, how we hire, how we admit students, how we treat our students. I mean, it's only in totalitarian regimes do universities allow that.
I gotta say, those little old ladies in front of the Tesla dealership, I feel like, A, I wouldn't mess with them, and B, I feel like what they're doing is putting the steel in the spines of a lot of other people who haven't been willing to stand out there in the sleet. There is an element of of all these decisions being interlinked. We, for example, over the last few days have been tracking efforts that we've been noticing at other universities around the country. Universities making efforts to band together. Senate faculty is voting in the Big Ten, to name one example. They're debating and voting on and potentially trying to set up kind of mutual defense compact. I think there's been some discussion about law firms that have entered into these deals with Donald Trump, now recognizing maybe those weren't good faith deals. They may want to get out of those. Those law firms may want to band together to jump out of those deals, to stand up together. Can you talk just from your academic perspective in terms of talking about the way other countries have dealt with this in other times and in other places, other contexts? Can you talk about the value of fighting together, of not fighting alone, and whether or not that makes you not just a bigger target, whether that makes you more effective and more resilient?
It definitely makes you more effective and more resilient, but it's difficult. As you know very well, Rachel, collective action problems are notoriously difficult to overcome because every CEO has to worry about his or her shareholders. Every university president's got to worry about their organization. Every NGO has to worry about being able to pay their staff. And when they get taken on individually, there's a strong incentive to be very pragmatic, to lay low, to not act, to make concessions, to do what is necessary to preserve oneself. The problem is if every individual university, every individual media outlet, every individual CEO, every individual law firm does that, acts out of self-preservation, then our entire civil society ends up on the sideline, and we end up where we've been the last few months. So overcoming that is really tough. One way to do it, the way that we've been recommending, is that society's most prominent and best endowed leaders have to act first. It's got to be precisely the people who got on their knees in December and January should be the people out there leading the way. And I think we're hopeful that Harvard setting this example will in fact empower other people to act collectively. So what happens when we act collectively? They don't have the capacity to punish hundreds of universities simultaneously. This is a way of sharing risk, and it's a way of communicating to society that, first of all, that there's a fight on. This isn't a one-way steamroller, but two, that there is a serious crisis that we have to respond to. I mean, we've gotten to the point where even David Brooks is calling on society to rise up in civic mobilization. So, acting collective, universities acting collectively can send a signal to others that it's possible, and it's a way of sharing the risk and sharing the cost so that no individual organization is likely to take such a heavy blow.
Yeah, and there's a lot of sort of elite organizing to be done soon to go to those elites who previously bent the knee, and decided to try to ride this wave to pull them back over to the other side. It's a really, really, really important point. Professor Stephen Levitsky at Harvard, thank you very much. Yes, thank you for being with us tonight, sir. Appreciate it. All right, much more news ahead here tonight. Stay with us.